All right, CP gang. Looks like we got another reaction. Looks like we're about to react to another video from Ray William Johnson. I know my energy is so low because I just got up and everything. But let's see what's going on, y'all. Let's see what's going on.
So this woman killed her husband and wrote a children's book about it. Now the woman's name is Corey, and Corey...
Whoa, wait. As soon as I get here, bro, what the world? Bro, as soon as I freaking get on this, as soon as I turn the video on, bro. Like, that's crazy, bro.
She's around 29 when this story starts, and she's living in Utah. And I told you Corey's story a few years back, but since then there have been some updates on it. Now, here's the thing about Corey. She's a real estate agent who's really into flipping houses. But, unfortunately, her business isn't doing too well. She's in quite a bit of debt. Debt that her husband doesn't know about yet. And she's willing to do just about anything to get some money to pay that debt off. So one day, she gets an idea. Why not just start stealing from her husband? Now, her husband is this guy, Eric. And Eric, he owns a stonemasonry business, and he's doing pretty well financially. And he apparently doesn't share finances with his wife because, she's terrible with money. I guess he's afraid she'll spend it all. So she starts stealing from him. She goes and she forges his signature and takes out a $250.
Bro, you can't trust these women for nothing, bro. No matter what you do, bro. Like, that's ridiculous. You steal from your husband. He doing all this stuff. Like, he should have been divorced her.
$1,000 equity loan on the family home, which he is the sole owner of. Not only that, but she begins withdrawing large sums of money from his business and personal accounts.
That's crazy,
Corey also
bro.
starts charging a bunch of things to his credit cards. So over the course of 5 to 6 years, all of this theft from her husband starts to add up to about $500,000. And if it couldn't get any worse, in 2020, she starts cheating on Eric with one of the handymen that she works with. But then that same year, her entire scheme falls apart. Because while Eric isn't aware of his wife's cheating yet, he does finally discover that she's been stealing from him. And he is super pissed. So he goes and he confronts her about it. And she comes up with some bullshit excuse and she promises to pay him back. But the damage is already done. Eric no longer trusts her. In fact, he contacts a divorce attorney. So it seems like he's considering divorcing her. But for whatever reason, he doesn't actually go through with it. He stays. Probably because they have 3 kids together. Although, he does meet up with another attorney and they remove Corey as the beneficiary of his estate, and he creates a trust and he puts his sister in charge of it. And he does all of this without telling Corey. He doesn't want her getting any of his money. And about a year goes by. So it's now 2021, and still nothing has improved for Corey. Her real estate and house flipping business is still failing, and by this point, she's put herself in millions of dollars in debt, buying up houses, trying to flip them, and apparently failing at it. Not only that, but she's still cheating. In fact, by this point, she's become emotionally invested in this guy that she's hooking up with. Like, she's thinking about making a future with this guy. And that is where things get complicated for her. I mean, she can't just leave Eric, because before they got married, they signed a prenup. So if she divorces him, she would get no money from his business or any of the assets he has. However, if Eric happens to die while they're still married, she stands to gain a lot. His business, a big chunk of his estate, and his other properties. So she starts thinking her best way out of this marriage is to murder Eric. And so at this point, it's 2022. And before Corey attempts this murder, she decides that she wants to secure as much money for herself as possible. So she tries to change his life insurance policy through his business. But that doesn't work. The insurance company catches it, and the change is reversed. Corey also takes out multiple life insurance policies worth around $2 million on Eric. And so then the time comes. The time that she's going to try and execute this murder. And in order to pull this off, Corey is gonna need some drugs. So she reaches out to her housekeeper, who we'll just call housekeeper. And Corey's like, "You got any drugs?" And housekeeper's like, "Yeah." So Corey tells her this whole bullshit story about how one of her investors has severe back pain and needs a strong painkiller, particularly fentanyl. And so housekeeper believes her and agrees to get her some fentanyl pills. Then housekeeper contacts the supplier, gets the pills, and hands them over to Corey. So now Corey has what she needs. 3 days later, it's Valentine's Day. And Corey knows this is the perfect day to make her move. So she makes a sandwich for Eric, and she laces it with some of that fentanyl that she got, and she gives it to him. And Eric takes a bite, and almost immediately, he's struggling to breathe, and he begins to break out in hives. Now, luckily, he reacts fast. He grabs one of his son's EpiPens, and he injects himself. Then, he drinks a bunch of Benadryl, and he eventually blacks out. Now, fortunately for him, he does survive this. But now, he's super suspicious of Corey. I mean, she's been stealing from him. Like, is she now trying to poison him? In fact, he becomes so suspicious that he goes and he tells his close friends and family that if anything ever happens to him, Corey is definitely the one responsible. Meanwhile, Corey, she's not giving up on her plan. She is determined to make this happen. So she goes back to housekeeper. And she asks for even more, stronger fentanyl pills. And once again, housekeeper gets them for her. And with that, Corey tries again. So one night, she and Eric are at home, and they're celebrating some business win for Corey. I guess she finally flipped a house, and so I guess she's like, "Honey, let's have a drink to celebrate." And he agrees to do this with her. Then she makes him a Moscow Mule, and she secretly laces it with about 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl. And poor Eric has no idea this is going on, and he drinks it.
Like I said, bro,
and sometime in between then and the next morning,
like I said, bro, he should have been divorced. Should have been divorced. Like what the?
He unfortunately dies. And of course, Corey calls 911, and she pretends to be all distraught. Later, medical examiners perform an autopsy, and they confirm that Eric did in fact die from a fentanyl overdose. And so at this point, police have no reason to believe otherwise. The guy probably took some drugs and accidentally died, so they think. So they close the case. And so now it looks like Corey's plan has worked, and it's time for her to enjoy the money. So she starts trying to claim the life insurance money from those policies that she took out on him. And she apparently gets $1.3 million of it. So now she can finally pay off some of that debt that she's in. And if all that isn't fucked up enough, Corey then decides to write and publish a children's book about how to deal with a loved one's death. And she calls it Are You With Me? And she says that this is helping both her and the kids cope with their father's passing. And this is actually her on TV promoting it. And so it's starting to look like maybe Corey is gonna get away with this murder. Until...
Exactly.
Remember when Eric told his close friends and family that if anything ever happens to him, that Corey is definitely the one responsible? Well, because of that, his family never fully believed the official story of his death. And so, while they're in court over a property dispute with Corey over Eric's estate, they hire a private investigator to look into financial issues related to this civil dispute. So this private investigator gets to work, and he starts looking into everything. And eventually, he discovers that Corey had bought fentanyl from her housekeeper right before Eric's death from fentanyl. He also uncovers her earlier insurance fraud attempts. And at the end of it all, he ends up turning all of this evidence over to the police. And so, bam, Corey is arrested. Here's her mugshot. And so later, she goes to trial, and she's found guilty, and she hasn't been sentenced yet, but she'll probably get life in prison.
Pretty sure. It's obvious. Yeah, obvious. That's good. Dang, crazy woman, bro. Nah. Oh, nah, bro.